Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Addiction, Alcoholism, and the Three Principles. My name is gregsuchy. I'm back again with Harry Durbitsky. And today we're joined by Joe Bailey and Barbara Smith. And kind of excited about this because we're going to talk about the first addiction recovery conference coming up in May on the 14th through the 16th in St. Paul, Minnesota. So this is really going to be an excellent opportunity for a lot of people to be exposed to the principles and learn more and find out just how this can be of assistance in their own recovery and what this means to people in that aspect. So I'm excited to get going. I'm going to get the Facebook Live started and pass it off to Harry here.
Well, hi, guys. Good to see everybody. I've been quite pleased with the development of this addiction conference. It's the first annual conference, and I believe it started in LA, in Los Angeles, when we had the 3PGC Global Conference. There was the feeling for the first time for me that we were coming together as a community. Before, it felt like it was a star-oriented program where people were running around trying to grab as much money as possible. To me, I'm not saying that's what it was, but that's what I saw. And then I had the sense that community we were starting to be a community, like we were on Salt Spring with Sid. You know, we were all just connected at the hip together. And then when Joe, Amy, and Barb headmanaged this first annual conference, again, I saw it as an expression of community, because all of the people who were working in addiction were separate from each other. They were individually successful, but they were not really as a community. And there was sort of a hierarchy and so on like that. And what I've seen, and it's a tribute to Joe and Amy and Barb, was that they did not lose their direction. And this is very important to see. Not everybody has to agree with the people who are head manning the conference, but the conference has to continue on. And those three have been, in my opinion, the mainstay of that. So they haven't lost their vision of how important it is, this first annual 3P addiction conference scenario. And the feeling that I had for me personally was that I started to connect with people. I started to know Joe a little bit better. You know, like we knew each other, but we really hadn't had much contact, probably 10, 15 years, Joe. And,
right.
You know, and we had different viewpoints and different ideas. But what I noticed was the softness of Joe. He was able, even though he's you can't push him around, we started to work and enjoy each other together. The same with Barb and the same with Amy. And so the sense of community happened. And one of the things, it's unfortunate, we're going to talk about the virus and the alternative plans and so on. But one of the things that I was especially looking forward to was coming together in physical form. As you probably are aware, Joe and Barb, Greg and I have never met each other. Like we've been working, 3 years. We've been over 3 years now, and we are definitely friends. You know, there's no doubt about it. We are friends, but we have never physically seen each other. And the same thing with, I have never met you, Barb, like physically. And so I was very much looking forward to all of this, you know, human contact as well, because I could. It helps develop community and networking and working together and seeing fresh ideas. And that's the importance of a community, what they're emphasizing. They have a lot of people coming on with different ideas, different approaches. And within that, you know, an example would be Barb and Christian have just written a book. What's it called, Barb?
Addiction. One cause, one solution. So
okay,
here it is.
Yeah, I have it. Now, I'm willing to bet it has a different flavor than Joe's book and has a different flavor than my book. And that's what community is. We offer for the minds, for the different minds, different ways to see the same thing that Sid has always pointed to, that it's inside you, and you're not here to fix yourself. You're just here to, well, groove, type of thing. So with that grooving concept and so on,
Groove.
you,
That dates you,
Well,
Harry.
yeah, Harry.
Harry, wow.
He's brother.
He's
Whoa.
Get my long hair out.
Harry's a groovy guy.
He is a groovy guy.
I gotta show this picture.
Groove on.
Must be Harry from the 60s. There
It's
we go.
Harry when he was Harry.
Ah, Harry.
Wait,
Very nice.
I wasn't sure which one's Harry. Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
really. Is that Janis Joplin with you, Harry? Or, I mean, who?
Hey, easy. So so the breadth of the conference is amazing. You must agree, Joe and Barb. Has a tremendous amount of variety, and there's a cohesiveness in it. Like, even though there's different flavors and different, we're still it come together. And I was quite honored to speak at the conclusion with Bill Pettit about the importance of Sid and our relationship to that and addiction. And I know Greg was very pleased to be on a panel, and because I personally think he's one of the best on panels, type of thing, unbiased as I am. I got to stop complimenting you, Greg. This is getting embarrassing.
his head is growing.
Yeah.
It's fine. I've got a French door to get out of this room, so I have plenty of room to open up.
Okay. Well, I'll keep doing it. So with that in mind, could you guys give us a little bit of the flavor of what you see the conference is, how it's going to help people? From what I see, it's for people who are working in addiction and also for those who are addicted. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
You want-
and then you talk a little bit about how you see that, how the flavor, and then get into, of course, the plan B, if type of thing. Because I just heard if I go to Minnesota, I have to be 14 days in quarantine when I come back, and I go, oh, well, that doesn't sound like fun. So, yeah.
So, Barb, maybe I'll just talk a little bit about kind of the inception of this and birth of it and the vision, and then we can kind of go back and forth. Yeah, thank you, Harry, for all your and Greg's generous comments and about the conference and about the work that we, not just the two of us, but Peter Jacobson is also on the main steering committee, and Amy and Barb and I, but there's about 30 some people who've been on the planning committee, some people more or less involved, but there's been a lot of people who've really come together in that sense of community because we share a common passion for helping people with addiction. And we see the incredible power of Sid's understanding of the three principles and how that informs us about addiction, one of the primary issues facing our time. With the epidemic of alcoholism is, of course, at the front of the row in terms of addiction still, but opioids and eating and you name it, we can get addicted to anything we think is going to make us feel differently than we do right now. But we all came together in that spirit that we've seen results. We've seen people really find true serenity and true sobriety, not just freedom from the chemicals, but freedom from the thinking around the chemicals. And that's what I think Sid's profound revelation, his awakening, showed just in this one little area of humanity of addiction, but throughout all things related human. And so we wanted to put a spotlight on the work that's being done in addiction initially, just to bring people in the three principles community together who were just to share what we're learning, what we're discovering, what works, what doesn't work, what some blind spots are that we've run into that we can share that we've overcome. But then we realized that no, this needs to be brought to the broader community of addiction counselors who know nothing about the three principles and might be enhanced in what they're doing in their treatment centers and their work by having an understanding of how the three principles really explain in a sense scientifically and spiritually behind the transformational awakening that has to occur for true recovery to happen. That shift in consciousness that Carl Jung and Bill W. talked about, that spiritual awakening. Sid's realization would have been right on board with Bill W., with Carl Jung, with all of these people that first started helping alcoholism back in the 30s. And so this is a pioneering conference in that sense for the professionals. But then we don't really want to leave out the people who are in recovery themselves and maybe want to share what they, like Greg and Mary and other people, how your recovery has been enhanced by your understanding of the principles. But people who haven't experienced that, I'm sober, but I'm not happy. I'm sober, but I'm still struggling. I'm sober, but something is still missing. I'm still craving something. And so I'm transferring from one addiction to another. So we want people in recovery, but also the people who they touch. So this is a very broad net that we envisioned. And we were hoping this was we've got a lot of people signed up already. We've had a tremendous response, even though it's still a couple months away. But then the pandemic hit. So I won't go into that yet, and just have Barbara add whatever you would to what I just said.
Sure. Well, it's been such a joy for me to get to know everybody a lot better, you and Amy, and as a result, Christian McNeil, who many of you know, and I decided last fall that we really wanted to try to get a book written in order to really put forward a very simple and clear and concise description of what we're talking about as it relates to addiction and the three principles. And, our goal was to get that done before the conference. So, because a lot of times the message can get skewed. It can get confusing to people. And we just really felt, particularly for people who are in early recovery, that it was really important to have something that was just concise and clear. And that was really a goal that we set out. Christian, for those of you who don't know, is in recovery herself. And I have over 40 years in the field of psychotherapy, over 30 of which have been in the field of addiction. And so we really wanted to come together and write something that would highlight both of our experiences, the experience of mine being a treatment professional and hers having been in the traditional recovery community, and then bringing in what we saw, how the principles have really transformed our experience, and how it explains so much of why it was working when it was and why it wasn't working when it wasn't. And so we really wanted to have that ready to bring to this conference, because to me, that's what it's all about, is not saying we have something that wasn't there before, but really trying to bridge, all the wisdom that's out there in traditional recovery programs and communities, and help them to see, like Joe was saying, why and how you get to a place of transformation, not just feeling better or not using or white knuckling it through recovery, but really true change in our lives that makes us, that brings us happiness and joy and peace. I've worked with people who've been in recovery for 30 plus years, and they're still in psychotherapy, they're still depressed, they're still anxious, they're still doing things that kept them, I think, trapped. And this understanding has changed that so dramatically. So I think that's really what we're trying to hold out in this conference, is to say there's something beyond just being sober. That being in recovery is so much broader than that, spiritually, physically, and that transformation, that is a possibility, beyond a possibility, that it's built into all of us. And that to me is the exciting piece about this whole thing.
I think of the slogan in AA, KISS, keep it simple, stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And as I observed over the last 40 some years that I've worked in the addiction field, the growing complexity of treatment, from, having to do not just 12 steps, but then meditation, and then mindfulness and CBT and DBT, and it just goes on and on and on as people, like you said. I was just with an old friend who got cancer, and he has been in AA forever, and he hasn't been around the principles, and he's just, every day of the week he has appointments for this specialty and that specialty and this support group and that support group for cancer survival or grief or this or that. And it's this hodgepodge of outside in approaches. And what Barbara's and Christian's book is so beautifully written. It's so simple, it's so clear, and it really points to the fundamental principles behind how does one wake up? How does one wake up to who they are? Essentially, their true essence, their true self, their innate resilience or wisdom that Sid always talked about. You're already well, you're not broken. But the only thing that interferes with our experience of that is a misuse of the mind. And that's the central point of yours and Christian's book that I took. It's the great misunderstanding of humanity that has led to this epidemic of looking outside in its many forms, from greed to alcoholism, drug addiction, foodaholicism, gambling addiction, on and on and on, and just to religious fanaticism, all the division that we see in the world, and for the simplicity of and it's I've been listening to Sid tapes and listening to Sid Banks and mentored by him for over 40 years, and directly or indirectly, and I still don't really know I can't really say what it is. I just know it's helping. It's like you can't really fully understand this. It's so big. It's so much bigger than any of us can really talk about with books or words or podcasts or anything. And so it's infinitely deep, but so infinitely simple. And so this conference, our dream is to bring together people who have maybe been applying this in addiction for longer periods of time and share that, but be students, all of us being students of each other, and learn from each other. Now, I don't know if, now we're still going to do the conference just to ease people's minds. We will do the conference. We don't know yet the form it will take because of recent events, and really this is just like, we just met last Wednesday and said, oh, we're going to go ahead and go forward with it at Metro State, and then 2 days later Metro State shut down, so we can't do it there. They're closed. They're, as are many institutions across the state of Minnesota, their students are sent home. They're not coming back from spring break. They're not quite sure when it's going to open up again. So having it in a physical location at the university, as we planned, seems off the table at this point. But we haven't made a final decision about that. We will by the end of this week. But we can still do it virtually, like we're doing right now. And so that's one plan B, is to do the conference. Those who are here can do it in a live setting or make it here somehow. Harry, I know you don't want to be in quarantine for 2 weeks, so you probably won't make it. But those who can drive here or get here, who are already living here, we could have a small group so we can live stream that and then bring in the others. Plan C would be to postpone the date until after this, hopefully, pandemic has waved through, and look to the fall. And so I've talked to Deb Mosby and to Ted Tessier, who are both professors at Metro State to see if they're going to help us. They're in Florida on vacation right now, but when they get back, we're going to check with them just to see if it's still possible for us to get a free venue like we got this time through the Substance Abuse Student Association. So that's where it's at right now. We will do it. We don't know if it's going to be virtual or postponed until the fall. Do you want to add anything to that, Barbara?
Well, I just think one of the things that's been so amazing for me in working with the principals, and certainly seeing how my clients who've been working with the principals for a while are handling this, it's just this sense of calm around the acceptance of going with the flow and being with what is, in this moment. If there's ever been a teacher, this time is that teacher that we don't know. Literally, it is changing moment to moment, day by day. And I think about 10 days ago when I was making all these plans for a book launch, and now that's off the table, and we can't gather groups of people, small or big or any size really at this point. That's not socially responsible. So I think the gift of seeing that life is ever changing, that there is this ever evolutionary flow to the way things are, and when we can be in alignment with that, how that works, and to just really relax into the fact that essentially nothing is under control, and that we have the ability moment to moment to rebalance ourselves and reorganize, and that's really been the great gift in working with this. It certainly was a gift in writing the book with Christian. Each time we would give each other feedback, or we would see something differently, we would change things, we would alter things, and that worked so beautifully that the book was able to sort of write itself in about a 4-month period. But when we resist that, then we get stuck, and it is what it is right now. We have no idea what this is going to look like a week from now or a month from now. But again, the principles give us the possibility of really handling life on life's terms with such grace and with such flexibility and with such capacity to really move through without a great deal of strain and stress. So I think the changes that are occurring moment to moment for all of us, we're just going to keep looking at what's possible and seeing. I mean, we don't know whether it's even possible to do it in the fall. If it is, that might be because I, like you, Harry, I really want to meet you guys. I want to meet you in person. I want to see Joe again. Haven't met Peter. I've never met Amy. I really would love to have, as they say, meet people with skin on.
Yeah.
But if that's not possible, that's we'll work around that. So, but I think we would like that to happen if that's at all possible.
Yeah.
It's important, really. The evolvement of the community is based on unusual magical moments happening between us. When Greg and I first got together, it was just a magical moment. Well, we were a million miles apart mentally, but spiritually we were connected, and that's what community means. When you'll meet someone who will actually not only inspire you, but almost like a soulmate, but but something like that connection of where you see yourself wanting to work with the person, not from your mental individual mind. It's just a more universal force. And that's what Sid saw on Salt Spring. It just started to go out. And he'd say, my God, it's all over the place. I don't even know. I'm the one who's the most knowledgeable about what's happening, but I don't even know what's happening. It's just all happening. And the magic of releasing this, because, it would be a dream for addiction to move up a few notches. It's not that we haven't done a nice job, but there's a movement and an opportunity. There's a soar in society, and we have the love and understanding to be able to fulfill Sid's dream in this area, which is simply alleviate suffering. That's all he cared about, alleviating suffering. And so this conference is remember, it's the first. The second will be better. I hope so.
And that's the one you're organizing, right, Harry? It's going to be in Canada.
Uh-oh.
Watch what you say, Harry.
That's right, Harry.
It's a lot of work.
Sounded like he just volunteered.
Yeah, it did. Yeah,
That's what I
No,
heard.
I think he got volunteered.
Yeah, I think I've always wanted to go to Vancouver, Harry. That sounds great.
Yeah.
I'll be sure to attend.
Second annual conference. Yeah. Well, I'll import Joe for a visit. Yeah.
I had one more point I wanted to make about the conference before we move on beyond that. And I was just reminded of a conversation I had with Dr. Dan Anderson, who was the founder of Hazelden. And when I was first asked to, I was actually published through a different publisher. And when I was giving a talk at the State of Minnesota Chemical Dependency Conference, Hazelden, one of their staff from their publishing department came up and offered me a contract with a check and said, Hazelden heard we were writing a book. We want you to publish it through us. And so I was, first of all, I was shocked. And I said, oh my God, are you kidding me? This would be way too controversial. Because at that point I was just having fantasies of being hung in effigy from the Nicollet Mall by the AA community for the heresies I was speaking to. That's how many people heard what I was doing, is heretical. And so they said, no, we see this as a way to unify all the addictions and prevention, as well as aftercare and treatment. So I spoke with Dr. Anderson, and I said, this book is about how to help people. It's really taking the deepest principles of a true psychology combined with the spiritual nature of AA to help understand how is it that light bulb goes off when people have that shift in consciousness, that spiritual awakening, that aha moment that you can see. And he said, we see in treatment, you can tell when someone has had that light bulb go off. Everything changes across the board. The way they relate to the other addicts, the way they respond in group, their whole complexion changes, their physical posture changes, their relationships to their family, their resistance goes away, their wanting to give and share. Everything across the board changes. And we have no idea how that happens. So if you have anything that would help us understand the mystery behind that wake up moment, that's the missing link in the treatment of addiction. So that was 40 years ago, almost. No, I'm sorry, 1980. 40 years ago.
40 years.
Do the math. Yeah, 40 years ago or 41 years ago when I had that conversation. And so here we are. We may not be 100% effective in passing that on to people. Of course we're not. We do the very best we can, but we have a leg up on what we have been doing, which is analyzing the past to try to understand the present, developing outside techniques to control our urges. We're pointing people instead to this innate health, this already perfectly designed system of self-healing, of immunity, of healing that's within all of us on a physical level, a psychological level, and a spiritual level. So this is a big deal. This is a really historical conference. Whenever and whatever form it takes, it will be. But I think it's just as relevant, and perhaps we can talk about get input from the group right now, that this is is just as relevant, if not more immediately relevant, to the panacea of, the coronavirus that we face, because it's affecting all of us and all of our families and all of our communities and our countries and our world. And if our leaders, our decision makers, all the people involved in dealing with this had their best, wisest, clearest thinking available to them, because their minds were calm rather than frantic, giving, like we talked about with Harry and Greg starting this podcast experience, if you have that feeling of wanting to help others, a genuine desire to help humanity, you're pulling on the divine energy of all things to give you the right thoughts, the right ideas, connect you magically to the people you need to connect to. When it's self-centered and ego-driven, it's all about me, it gets in the way of this natural propensity to correct ourselves and heal ourselves and our systems, because we have to heal the healthcare system in order to test people, in order to contain it, in order to do the right actions to deal with this crisis. So I'm just going to throw that out there as an option that we can maybe throw around today. How can the principles help us first personally to stay calm in this great unknown that we're walking into? I don't know when there's potentially, this is one of the biggest pandemics ever. We don't know that, but some people are thinking that. So how can the principles help us, and how can we help other people understand this so that we can give it our best shot? People will die. This is not going to be easy, but we can go through this with more grace and a deeper intelligence if we're grounded in an understanding we call the three principles. So what do you think?
I think it's vital because it will help keep people present with where things actually are, rather than feeling like it's time to go buy 2 years worth of toilet paper and dish soap and whatever, realizing that what we need
I've
to do
got
right
mine.
now.
I'm just saying.
You always keep some somewhere. Are you selling
You never
that? Is
know,
that
Joe.
it's only $100 a roll. But it's that mentality that's causing most of the anguish with people right now, because the number of people actually affected by this is still a very small percentage, and yet the people are responding in a way as if it's everybody around them is infected. And it's not a healthy mind frame to be in, because then you're reacting rather than responding to things. And you're doing things like I witnessed yesterday, people screaming at each other over a couple of cans of soup at a store. It's insane to me, because the manufacturers haven't stopped making food. They haven't stopped making toilet paper. They haven't stopped making hand sanitizer. You know what I mean? More is coming in. We don't need to stock up when it comes in. We can share with everybody, let everybody have enough, rather than be in this mentality of me, 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 me. I have to hurry up and protect myself and my immediate family and whatnot, which you need to do. We need to take precautions in a responsible, calm kind of fashion, and wash your hands like we're supposed to be doing anyway. I mean, just, it's not hard, and but that mentality is what really needs to change for people to successfully make it through this. Because we all know that when you're stressed and you're anxious, that your immune system is not as strong. So you're actually making yourself more compromised and more likely to have issues if you do come in contact with this virus. So there's a lot of benefits all the way around to having this understanding and having that calmness that comes with it, and keeping in touch with what's really going on, rather than what the media is making it sound like is going on.
For me, the essential thing is, I was a little bit surprised how heavy the feeling I had with it. It was beyond my control, and it was highly restrictive. It seemed to infringe on my civil rights to do things and to meet people and when as I had to sit with that heavy feeling. And then my kids started to phone me because they were worried I'm in the older bracket, and they were sharing all this love. And because they shared love with me, I felt gratitude. And once the gratitude poured in, it felt much easier, much easier. I felt, oh, I can still be myself. Where before I felt like this was like addiction, a very heavy feeling with lack of hope. And maybe that's what 3P does. It gives us resiliency and hope that there is a nicer feeling than what I'm feeling right now. And to me, when people see that in addiction, they're moving into terrain that is very, very beautiful. And that's sometimes I get a little upset with people talking about the problems of, and then how 3P deals with that, when in reality, what we're really looking for is a breath of fresh air. And my kids gave me that.
It's beautiful.
I think until people can really get that all we're ever experiencing is the feeling of our thinking. It feels so true that a virus or that a pandemic or that whatever is the cause of what it is we're feeling. But until we have that clarity and the peace of mind to know, okay, well, all I'm doing here is creating my experience of this pandemic by how I think about it in this moment. And that's really where our power is. That's where we get the power to be able to ride the wave of fear. Certainly we all have them. I had dinner with a group of friends last night, and I got to tell you, there were moments people wanted to hug, and I was like, I felt, like I really don't want to go here. But then, I was like, well, what the heck? We've just breathed all over each other anyway. And then my more rational part could come on, in line. And I thought, well, we're going home. We're not going to be really interacting with any other people for a while. And, you just are able to problem solve so much more effectively. But again, when you lose sight of that, when you lose sight of what it is that's bringing about the fear, that's when you get caught in it. It's like you get swept away with it instead of being able to stand with both feet on the ground as the world goes by at whatever pace it's going by at that moment and delivering us whatever challenges it's delivering us.
I'm recalling Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR. Historically, when the world faced a similar crisis, it was the World Depression, and his most famous quote was, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." Because he says, when we're afraid, we do our worst thinking. When we're afraid, we overreact or we underreact. It can go both ways. You can go into denial with fear and not wash your hands and not do the common sense things that you need to do. Or you can overreact and compulsively wash your hands and never see anybody again. So this, how to operate from false evidence appearing real, which is the acronym for fear, is so powerful when we can see that. There was a woman I interviewed for my book that I'm working on. Barbara's and Christian are way faster than I am. I've been laboring at this for years. I guess I'm caught up in my thinking about it somehow, or it's just evolving. One of the two.
We're younger, Joe.
Huh?
We're younger.
Oh, you're younger. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Don't remind me of that. Yeah. But one of the people I interviewed is a woman named Mahima. She's just a lovely young woman in her late 20s from in Nepal, and she, as a young woman, was responsible for emergency preparedness for the country of Nepal, and for the city of Kathmandu, where she lives. And so she worked with the airlines, with the medical staff, with the educational institutions, the Chamber of Commerce, all this, to help them develop protocols to prepare for emergencies, and most likely of which in Nepal would be an earthquake. And she said what she found in all of her experiences, whether it was with plane crashes or fires or different things, if people remained calm, they were able to use common sense and follow their protocol. And when they weren't, they tripped over each other, they made mistakes, they caused more deaths. And so this psychological dimension, she said, I was very curious. And she would go on the internet and look for things, and she found the three principles. And it was the first thing that really made sense to her. And she watched hundreds of videos on different approaches. But it was when the actual earthquake hit, and she and her siblings and her grandparents and parents and nieces and nephews were huddled in the grandparents' home, waiting for the next tremor, aftershock to hit, after, thousands of people had died and been killed. The city was in rubble. Everything was a mess, and she's in charge, right? So she's huddling and afraid like everybody else. And that phrase that Barbara just said, we're always living in the feeling of our thinking, it kept running around in her head for whatever reason. She couldn't get it out of her mind ever since she heard it. But at that moment, when she was in that situation, her little niece, who was about 3, is just running around and playing with her dolls and having a grand old time, while the adults were just sitting around huddling in fear. And the little girl looks up at them all and says, "Can't you see? Can't you see it's over?" And at that moment, when her little niece said that, it hit her like a lightning bolt. I'm living in the feeling of my thinking. I'm not living in the feeling of the earthquake. I'm living in my feeling about my thoughts of the earthquake. It's all my expectations. It's all my apprehension that's creating all my anxiety. And she said, a calm swept over me, and I knew exactly what to do, how to make us safe. And she said, in that moment, I realized, my God, if all the relief workers, all the physicians, all the politicians, all the leaders knew what I know from that simple phrase, this would make our rescue efforts go a lot better. So she got on the phone. She called what was the Tikkun conference, or she called Rudy Kennard, who happened to be at the Tikkun conference in London, coincidentally, and said, "Rudy, can you and a few other people come over and work with the relief teams and whatever?" And Rudy stood up in the room and said, "I just got a call from Nepal. I want to start a GoFundMe project to get me and a few other people over there." And he raised, I don't know, $5,000 or something in a couple minutes, and enough to send them all to Nepal to work with these teams. And then they also had Bill Pettit and many other of us do podcasts that were sent out on the iPhones to the relief workers and the doctors. And so they kept learning about the three principles. And she said it was miraculous how it helped them not burn out, stay in the field 3 or 4 times longer than they normally would, because they didn't get stressed out. They were present. They were able to be of service. They just had more energy, more clarity, more right-mindedness, and it made a huge difference. So that's just I just use that as an example of the power of fear and the power of fearlessness in dealing with this pandemic we now know exists. If this little video, even just this one, Harriet and Greg, it'll get out on the internet and go like wildfire, because this is what people need to hear right now. However, if it's in this form or not, people are searching for a way to find calm without denial, drugs and alcohol, find another way to trust something that's so deep in each of us. It's 100% reliable. It's a constant that we can rely on, that all we're ever doing is feeling our thinking. that we're experiencing the power of this force of thought, the force of mind, and the force of consciousness to create an experience, that when we see that, we are operating at our optimal psychological health. And when we don't see that, we can be the smartest scientist in the world and we can't see our ass from our elbow because we're locked in fear.
And spiritually, this thing is happening. And it's happening because, like, for whatever the reason, I have been amazed that for the first time since I can remember, people are not putting money ahead of everything else. People are putting human safety. And I'm also feeling that people who have been very, very content within their own little island of life are suddenly feeling compassion for other people who have been suffering, who are poor, who are going through opiate crisis or addiction crisis or poverty crisis or sexual crisis or et cetera, et cetera. You can feel the compassion and caring of us as a humanity. We had to stop, guys. We had to stop. We were going 100 miles an hour. It's kind of like George Pransky's joke. You're on the airplane. He says, I got good news and bad news. The good news is we're making better time than we've ever made before. And the bad news is we're lost. And that's what the world feels like. And this is, we're stopping and we're taking another look at our world. And isn't that what addiction is about too? They stop and then they get that insight or that breath of fresh air that Joe is alluding to, or Barbara or Greg is alluding to, or all of us are alluding to, because we're all in this community together. We're all trying to see this breath of fresh air that means freedom. Freedom to be myself. Freedom to agree that the world is a beautiful place. As Sid would say, heaven on earth. And this is part of it. But again, it's a very interesting part, certainly mind-boggling part. Well, I'm going to get off my platform here. I'm going to get elected pretty soon, so.
Watch out.
Hi,
Hi.
can I speak? Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Mary Britt, and I'm really grateful and happy to say I live on the other side of the mighty Mississippi from my friend Joe Bailey. And so hi, Joe. And I know
see you over there through the valley.
Pardon?
I see you through the valley.
All right. Yeah. So it has been my wonderful pleasure to know and be a part of the three principles for almost 5 years now. And I think I started to get to know Joe probably, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. And it has helped me a lot, and it has made such a big difference. But the other beautiful thing for me is before the three principles, I had been a recovering alcoholic for many years. So I do have this wonderful foundation. And so I'm very grateful that the hope is to bring more awareness to the recovery community. Something Harry said, I don't have to know everybody's full story, but I know so many wonderful recovery people in the St. Paul community. I just know by heart because we've, our souls, we just kind of know each other, even though, so it's a beautiful thing. And I hope that somehow this can be shared more and that people in the recovery community can understand that the three principles does dovetail with this. It's a great match. It's helped my sobriety big time to know this. It's given me a way stronger foundation. I did have a difficult time a couple of years ago when someone of authority in the three principles, not Joe, but to me had said that, that alcoholism is not a disease. And, and really what it prompted me to do it's hard for me to say. I know that it's a, perception thing. Anyhow, I won't try to explain all, but what that prompted me to do was to go spend time at detox. And I really love going to detox and trying to encourage people into recovery. I mean, the people that are really, hardcore suffering with this day to day, for them to be able to hear the three principles message, I don't know how to get that to them. I mean, I can offer them love and compassion, which we do, but to try to tell them that it's just their thinking, I don't think that's not possible. But for them I wrote down here, belonging and connecting, and we all have to experience. Everybody's got to experience it themselves, So I want the circle to keep getting bigger and bigger. And sometimes it might not. I don't think it's such a bad thing to say, it is a disease. It is a discomfort. It is our thinking, but it's, I don't know. I don't know what I do know what I'm trying to say. I'm just that I wish there was a better way to get the three principles to the people that are really down and out, I try to share it much as some, and now really I just talk about steps 1, 2, and 3. I can't, God can, and all this is about learning to be in the present moment anyway. There's such interaction, and there's such interaction with A Course in Miracles. So at any rate, the more we can get more people into this, I'm on your side. I want to be helpful too.
What you say it has merit, because one of the involvement of the three principles has to be a global solution, and it has to deal with poor, underprivileged people where there's less money involved in the scenarios and so on. And just be aware that Sid had to wait all these years for us to reach this limited level that we've done. And he would be very pleased that this would give the opportunity for what you're talking about to happen. It will happen. I don't know when, but it will happen. Everything is going to happen. Once it's out, it just nothing can stop it. But you're correct. We need more compassion and understanding, more knowledge of how to deal with that particular crowd. And we have to have projects that deal with that specifically. But we're still a little ways away from it, type of thing.
Yeah, and I'm not really saying my fellows that are in recovery, that buddies that have been in recovery for a long time, I'm like, hey, come down and have an open mind, come to a three principles meeting. And it's hard to get people to open up their minds even more. And so really, the best thing I can do is try to be an example. And as Joe knows, he's met one of my sons. But anyway, in my whole life, I'm a work in progress all along. I'm some days I'm doing better than others, but it's encouraging others to keep having an open mind. Hey, there's more wonderful truth to be realized. It's all great. It's all great.
The key, though, isn't that there's one particular way to share about this, because there isn't one particular way that people listen. So you need to come up with your way of communicating what you've experienced, because that's where the true feeling comes through. Not that you memorize how Joe says it or how I say it or Harry or Barbara or anybody else. You need to say it how you've experienced it, because then you will reach the people who are open to hearing it from that perspective. Does that make sense? That's how we're going to reach more people, is by more people sharing it honestly and genuinely in the way that they've experienced it and understand it. Not by trying to have one single unified message, because that's what other programs have tried, even though obviously their approach is different because they're dealing with symptoms rather than the cause. But ultimately, people listen differently. So they need to hear it differently. So share it how you share it. That's the beauty of it. You get in the trenches with the people and you figure out how they're listening. That's the key. The message is the same no matter what words you use. It's that space that you're holding. It's that feeling that you bring with you. The words are not that important.
I do think, if I could interject something here that has been a little bit of a fly in the ointment, I think, in the three principles community, is too quick to judge what other people are doing instead of seeing the common thread of truth and understanding. And we're bridge builders. You know, I think it's very easy to get dogmatic even about the three principles, or to get judgmental with the three principles. And a lot of that's happened with 12-step programs and what other therapies are doing, et cetera. I think we go a lot further when we can build a bridge to pointing out that those parts, like, and this is what I've tried to do in my career with addiction field, is to help see the wisdom in AA. You know, kind of there's a lot of contaminants as well, because that was developed at a time when psychiatry and psychology was, you know, not too far from, you know, burning people at the stake, you know, that were mentally ill. So it was at its infancy. That there wasn't, the three principles weren't available then. But if we can see the wisdom in the 12 steps and in other support groups and other modalities, it builds a bridge to people being more interested in listening to you. If you judge what's helped them or what they think has helped them, you just create a wall. And Barbara and Christian are leading one of the panels at the conference specifically about this. What other support groups who have been working with addiction, including the 12 steps, how the three principles can enhance what they're doing, and also how those support groups can be of help for people who are in recovery who still need support, and that collegiality of other people in recovery, because there's beautiful, wise things that happen. I've been to many 12-step meetings and given people medallions and all that while I've been in the three principles. And I'm amazed, people not knowing anything about Sid Banks of the principles, maybe a week's sobriety, the insights that come out of people are mind-blowing. So I think we've got to see a way to, if we're going to ever get this message out beyond the choir to the masses, we have to respect everybody. Sid always said, whatever your religion is, go to your church, go to your synagogue, go to your teepee, go whatever has worked for you. But the principles will help you understand the deeper truths, the essential truths at a deeper level in your various religions. And he would, say the same thing about AA as a religion for millions of people, basically. And it's something that people gather and try to share wisdom. So I think the less we judge and the more we build a bridge and find the common thread of what is it that's working in the 12 steps when it really works, because it doesn't work that often. But when it does,
I agree with that.
when it does, well, 5%, it's just AA. So when it does work, what is it that's really working? And that's how we can show, this is what's actually happening. When the mind is quiet, in the still mind, truth emerges, insight happens. When the mind is stilled, we reconnect to the divine intelligence and wisdom that we all are. You can call that your higher power. You can call that Yoda. I don't care what you call it. It's a deeper intelligence that we're all connected to and a part of. And we have to get away from being the thought cop in the three principles, in my opinion, of how people are saying it and whether they're saying it right or wrong or whatever. It's just become a barrier rather than a bridge. We want to build bridges instead of barriers. I'm so excited, Barbara. Maybe, Barbara, you can talk about yours and Christian's ideas, because we're having a lot of people on the panels who are members of 12-step or there are many other kinds of programs in mindfulness and things that have sprouted up that people go to, but have also been really transformed through their understanding of the principles. And so we're going to have people talking about and sharing their stories. But Barbara, you talk about, I'll shut up.
Well, I just think from both Christian and my perspective, I've been in the business of doling out basically behavioral prescriptions for people in recovery for a long time. Try this, before I found the principles, I was doing a lot with meditation and a lot with Buddhist psychotherapy and a lot with, and I've done cognitive therapy and, years and years and years of different therapy du jour and practices du jour. And seeing that, seeing the principles has just taken so much off of people's minds in terms of what it is they have to do to get and stay sober. I mean, most people in this day and age are living in a time of unprecedented stuff in their lives, physical stuff to do, options to, I think about some of the young parents that I have now who have, when I was their age, we didn't even have answering machines. If you weren't home, you didn't get a phone call. Now they're on 24-hour call for everything, instantaneously. And their minds are so stressed. And then you start adding on all these prescriptions for, you got to get to this many yoga classes and that many AA meetings and this many, do this many amends and this many. And that's one of the things that Christian talks about so well, because she lived that for so many years and it really stressed her out, and she said, despite all of that, I didn't really see very many people who were finding peace and joy and happiness. And so, again, what is it, as Joe's saying, at the basis, at the foundation of mind and that of this deeper spiritual principle that we're okay. I mean, you don't have to do all that stuff. You don't have to add to your plate. We use the term that Jamie Smart coined of subtractive psychology. We want to take things off your mind so that your mind can function optimally. Instead of adding all these things that you have to do to be okay. And then I think as your mind settles down, the wisdom, you're hearing the wisdom so much more clearly, because there isn't all this static, there isn't all this noise, there isn't all this chatter that's sending you in this direction and on all these wild goose chases. Then you're just looking in one direction for the answers that have always been there. It's just that we couldn't hear them, because it's kind of like having your own inner GPS, but you can't hear it because, there's like the kids in the back seat are screaming and they're watching a video and the radio's on and the windows are open and you're in traffic and the horns are blowing. I mean, there's just too much noise and too much static. And so when we can settle that down and take things off of people's mind and take all these practices off your plate of you have to have that. That doesn't mean you may not choose to do those things, but you don't have to have them in order to find your way towards this peace that exists right below the surface in all of us. So I don't know if that answers your question, Joe, but
I think it's just super economical.
It is. Yeah.
I think back to
free. It's free.
Yeah, the Nepal story that literally does translate into money terms. The relief workers would only be able to stay out in the field for 2 weeks after the earthquake. Once they had this understanding seed planted, they could stay double that amount of time, 4 weeks, without a break. And they could recuperate in 1 week instead of 2. So they increased their efficiency, I don't know my math here, 4 or 5-fold. And think of that just in terms of lives saved, suffering lessened, money less spent. Happiness lowers a lot of overhead, as I used to have that sign in the Minneapolis Institute of Mental Health on the wall. Happiness lowers a lot of overhead, because when you get unhappy and you get insecure, you try to find material solutions to a spiritual problem. It's just so simple. It's just like, God, it's just, I always call this flat forehead therapy, because I always go, God, I can't believe it's this simple.
Meta has something to say, Greg. She raised her hand. Is it true, Meta? I thought you had raised, yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry I got late here. I thought it was later on. This was starting today. But, well, yeah, I'm happy to hear the things about building bridges. Oh, I'm Danish, so I'm just trying to pronounce it as well as I can. But I have been going to AA for more than 18 years and been sober for more than 18 years, and I'm happy to have, and I'm still going there. And I will say I have met this freedom you were also talking about by going there. I have made what I call God, met what I call God there. I have met the freedom through that. Not every day, and I felt home when I came to AA. I also felt home when I found you people. Actually, a little bit here, more in just 3P, but here where we are talking about alcoholic and so on, I have to find comfortness because of this things between AA and this and what is more right than the blah blah. That's not comfortable for me, but it's okay. But I have one thing to say. We don't need to do all this stuff standing in this little book. And through the years, what is standing in this little book, the steps, has become much bigger work than it was originally. And I think that's a problem, because in the start, it took 1, 2, 3 days to do the steps. And then you was to live in the solution, which was the connection to your higher power. So the part where you were looking at what did I do wrong, whom did I hurt, I see that as a way for me, because as you know, I did something that was not that nice. And to be good to me, I need to say I'm so sorry to some people, to be able to let go of that. For sure, in the beginning of my time as trying to become a longer period of free of alcohol. And for that I am thankful. But to make it a process that has to take years, it's not what this was about originally.
That's right.
But of course, as you all people, everybody who are doing something wrong today and are having, as I see it, this opinion about things and life and how to treat each other. If we are doing something wrong, of course, we are going out saying, oh, I'm sorry. It's not your fault. And actually, I think that in a lot of the steps, and if you read them and if you try to put thought in some of the things here, instead of alcohol or something, I think we could find very much more things that are alike than there are not alike. And I'm really think it's nice to hear about the bridge, because I think that's the way. And for sure, I can say my freedom has been in a lot of things where I have had, yeah, thanks. I call it God. I don't care what it is. Universal wisdom, whatever, have given me the freedom when I am deeply wanted to let go of something, when I deeply ask God to take it away from me, or helping me being a better person, or whatever. And I think I'm sharing that a lot in AA meetings. And I don't know if they hear 3B and it doesn't matter. If they hear something that make me able to let them see 3P, I'll introduce him. And I think that's the way. That's my opinion.
Well,
I
that's
think it would be interesting one day to try to connect the 12 step with this thought, actually. It could be an interesting meeting. Thanks.
I've actually done a lot of research on that, Meta, and I really thank you for your comments, because I just think that there's a saying in AA, it's the program of attraction, not promotion. And what you just demonstrated was that attraction, not trying to convince someone, you're just letting your own serenity and your own sobriety and your own wisdom be the bridge. People then are curious. They want to know more. Well, man, how come you're so calm? How you've been 18 years sober? How could that be? What's your secret? What did you discover? So when you're an embodiment of what it is you're speaking, when you have, Sid would say, when you're in the feeling, when you're talking from the feeling versus from a concept, you're much more able to. We just lost half our group here. I don't know what happened. There we go. We're back. We're much more able to create that bridge through that feeling. And this is the kind of conversations that we'll have at the conference. By the way, Lisa and I are supposed to speak at the Recovery Church, which is in St. Paul. It's the biggest church that's all based on recovery, where there are 2 3 principal support groups and lots of AA meetings, all under the same roof. And so we're hoping to get as many of those people to attend the conference whenever it happens and however it happens. I'm sorry, Harry, I interrupted you. You were going to say something.
Oh, no. I thought what you said was better than what I would have said, to be honest. So, and that's the beauty with the conferences. We're all going to we all have different levels of questions and different things that personally we haven't answered within ourselves. That's the greatest treat of working in addiction, is I have a lot of questions yet to answer. There is a lot to understand. And even though the principles have the simplicity of the answer, it's like, it seems to me that the clarity of it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And the freedom it provides is just beautiful. And to be open when Meta is sharing her spiritual insights and to what she's experienced. In the old days, I would have said, no, that's that. But you're right, Joe and Meta. It is this. We're in this global world. We have to learn how to share it. Sid was just an ordinary guy. He didn't really look at your outside. And if you were very poor, he was generally more compassionate rather than, judgmental about the scenario. And we're all kind, beautiful human beings. That's obvious. We wouldn't be in this room if we weren't kind, gentle, loving, caring people. And there's many levels of questions. What Bob has on his mind is different than Catherine, which is different than C. Beeman, who, whatever. It's the beauty. The beauty is the nourishment is going to be provided. If you're hungry, it's nice to go to a buffet. And this is, to me, what Joe and to be honest, it's not Joe's conference. It's not Amy's conference. It's our conference. And as we make it ours, you can feel it. You look at Barbara, I'm just noticing, gee, Barbara feels stronger than she was on before. Well, she's been sharing in the group and sharing with the book, and it's put a little punch in her type of thing, and type of thing. And that, I mean that is a big compliment.
Well, thank you, Harry.
Yeah,
I think what we've gotten is clarity. I mean, as Joe was saying, the longer you're in this, and the more you're looking in this direction, the more clarity, the more you see. It's like anything else. The more you study. This morning on our walk, I was just seeing these pine trees and how many pine cones there were on them. I just, wow, look at all these pine cones. Like, how did I miss this before? So I think when we're putting our attention in any area, you do start to see things and you have much more clarity. And I think the process of writing the book really helped both Christian and I get a tremendous amount of clarity around what is it that we're really saying. I mean, we really wrestled with that. Like, what is it? What are we saying here? What's the point? So it really, a clear mind really offers things that are very valuable to us in terms of helping us make our way through life.
And caring.
And carry, yeah.
Yeah.
Caring.
Would you guys mind if I say something?
No, go for it.
Go. It's a free forum. It may appear that we're the bosses, but the truth is we're not.
Okay, you guys, I had this card, and this was, I'm just going to read to you the second half of compassion. And I gave this to, and this is from the Dalai Lama. I gave this to a friend that just celebrated 40 years of sobriety, and I believe that he practices this. This is the second half of compassion. And I think that you all, I think we're all trying to do this, and I appreciate that. It says, to be genuine, compassion must be based on the respect for the other and on the realizations that others have the right to be happy and overcome suffering just as much as you. On this basis, since you can see that others are suffering, you develop a genuine concern for them. And earlier it said that it is wrong. Any love and compassion which entails looking down on the other is not genuine compassion. At any rate, I feel that with the three principles, and I think that's our big goal. And I do understand, living in the present, which is what you're saying too. But and meeting us all where we are is how this is going to continue to grow, I believe. Thanks for listening.
So Joe and Barb and Gray, maybe
Thanks,
if you could sum up, feeling and so on. We're starting to get. I don't mind hanging around, but
my battery signal just came up and said I have 7 minutes left on my battery. So
All right, you go first, Joe.
You go for it.
Well, I don't know. I'm just, I really have enjoyed this time with all of you. And it just feels so good. My wife and I, Michael, she and I have been sick with the flu for the last week, coughing and sneezing and hacking and isolating ourselves. And for the first day, I'm feeling well. And I think you're a big part of that. So it's nice to be in community with other people and share this beautiful understanding with one another. And I'm so looking forward to whatever form the Three Principles in Addiction Conference takes, and whether it's May 14th or the 16th or next fall, or in virtual form or physical form. So I hope all of you can be there, either virtually or in person, when it happens. And much love to all of you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for joining us.
Nice. Yeah.
Go
I'm
next,
looking
Barbara.
forward to it too. Yeah, I think I'm just so excited, and thank you guys again for all this work that you've done over the years. And I just wanted to say I met Christian through your show. She saw me on your show, and then Greg, you hooked us up. So
That's right.
The beginning. Yeah, so that was the beginning of what was a very productive relationship. So I just thought you might want to know that. It would, awesome. If I hadn't been on the show, that wouldn't have happened. So that's great. And hopefully those connections will continue to make, and the more that we can be in relationship with one another on deeper and deeper levels, and and without judgment, and really building bridges. I think that is going to make a world of difference in terms of getting this out there to the bigger public. And I'm so looking forward to the conference. I hope it can be in person, and we'll make it work however it needs to work, given the state of the world right now. So I hope to see you all soon. I hope if you haven't picked up a copy of the book that you'll do that. Give us your feedback. Let us know what you think. Joe's a great fan. We're very appreciative of all that he did to lead that charge, and he was a great inspiration to both of us, and we were just really grateful to sort of update it by 30 years a little bit, and he's very gracious about that.
Well, it's the cutting edge of the addiction knowledge at this point. I think it's just amazing. And you and Harry, and you know, when I wrote the Serenity Principle, it was called neocognitive psychology. That's how long ago it was.
Yeah.
And what's amazing, like Joe's writing a new book. It's going to be way better than his other book. Not to say the other book wasn't, you know, but it's grown. He's changed.
Yeah.
Barb is, I'm writing my book. I've written 30 chapters. Well, how could I write? I thought I wrote everything in the first book. Now I have 30 more chapters.
Wow.
You know,
you guys are inspiring me.
But honestly, I'm looking, I'm going, whoa, when did this all happen? You know, but we're all evolving together.
Indeed. Yep.
That's it. That's
the
oneness.
And I think ultimately what we're talking about here is awareness of how things are working. You know, these principles are working whether we're aware of them or not. And with awareness, we can make conscious choices instead of letting habitual thought patterns run the show. We can be more aware of what's going on and make better choices in our lives rather than reaching out for a drink or a drug or whatever. We could reach out for a hug. We could reach out for just connecting with another person and go for a walk. But yeah, right now we'll settle for the elbow bumps. But at some point, I still hug people. I don't care. If I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die living. That's how I'm gonna put it. But I love everybody. This has been an amazing conversation. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with the conference, which I'm really hoping is in person. So I like the idea of postponing it until fall, if that's something that can work out.
Me too.
Stay tuned.
I'd much rather be able to have people together. So
stay tuned to the website. We'll announce it later this week.
So what is the website? Why don't you tell people how to find out more?
It's 3precoveryconference.com.
Okay, and whatever you post, we'll post in our group
good
as well. Yeah, just to keep sharing the energy. Okay.
That's great.
All right. Wonderful.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Thanks
Harry.
so much, guys.
Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, thanks
Thank you,
everybody.
Barbara.
Wasn't this fun? This